Croeso, welcome everyone to our Wales TUC cross-union online event sort of discussion really today on keeping schools safe and open. My name is Shavanah Taj. I'm the General Secretary of the Wales TUC. The Wales TUC in Wales represents 48 different affiliated trade unions with over 400,000 members and growing in Wales. I just wanted to say, first and foremost, please do be aware that we are going to be recording this event and also posting during the meeting a series of questions in the sidebar for the purposes of polling. So I urge you to engage with that as well. I wanted to also just to say that following today's meeting, what we are going to be doing is we're collating all of your different voices and all the findings that we have, because ultimately this is about hearing from each and every one of you so that we can step up our lobbying campaigning work. We are also going to be looking to release to do a press release following this event as well, because it is important that people actually understand how people are feeling in school settings at the moment. I want to acknowledge and thank your trade union representatives, your trade union officers, for continuing to ensure that your voices and concerns are being heard by the First Minister, but at all social partnership and collective bargaining tables as well. So today with us, we have Laura Dole from NAHT Cymru, who's also, as I understand, the newly elected Schools Education's Trade Union Side Chair. We have David Evans from the NEU. We have Dilwyn Roberts Young from ICAC. We have Bertha Felder from Voice. We have Neil Butler from NASUWT. We have Ethne Hughes from ASCL. We have Rosie Lewis from Unison. And we also have Nicholas Savage from the DMB on this call as well. I'm sure you know, you will be hearing from your colleagues at some point. Ultimately, the purpose of today was, it's very clear to me that there are growing concerns now about safety, health and safety in school settings. There's real issues around attendance rates, not just among children, but also staff. You know, we've heard all kinds of stories around school heads actually saying that it's actually becoming quite difficult, even when they are contacting agencies to provide staff cover as well, because of the growing rates of COVID within this sector, which means that, you know, it's becoming much more difficult to be able to provide cover and for that to be done safely. But all of this ultimately links back to the effectiveness of the protective measures that have been removed from the framework agreement that had originally existed. So we're all very clear. Everyone wants to support our school communities, but there is this real general feeling that this should not be done at the expense of the well-being of staff, because ultimately it is the children in school who are then affected when staff morale deteriorates. So that is just actually a quote from a union member, and I'm sure many of you on this call today can relate to that. But what's very clear, and today, this morning, we had a social partnership meeting where we meet with the First Minister and other social partners on a regular basis to talk about the impact of COVID-19 and what is happening out there. And we made the position very clear to the First Minister, but also to the Education Minister, who was on the call as well, about the position that we find ourselves in. So all of the education trade unions are in complete agreement with the Welsh Government that continued learning in school should be a priority. However, we believe that mitigation measures should continue to be in place for our schools to help keep learners and staff safe from contracting COVID-19. And if we fail to put protection for everyone in place now, we will continue to see unmanageable levels of staff and pupil absences, which could lead to long-term issues. So the guiding principles of the framework, of course, are to enable schools to operate as business as usual as far as possible, including the provision of free breakfast and after-school clubs, extracurricular activities and practical subjects, to secure the best outcomes for all learners by considering both their educational needs and their well-being, managing ongoing risks of COVID-19 as safely as possible, and ensuring clarity of actions are required if there is a case in a school, but also managing mitigations on a local basis dependent upon the prevalence of COVID-19. So the unions have been very clear in terms of what it is that we are seeking. There has been, your unions have been collating lots of data, and this information has been shared with the Assembly members and wider politicians too, including council leaders. But the unions are very clear in terms of what our key asks are around the framework and the mitigations. So firstly, to review the current framework, risk levels and mitigation measures to determine whether more stringent measures are needed to maintain the continuity of education, e.g. grouping of learners, staggered session times, isolating contacts, and of course, mask wearing. That we produce very clear guidance on expectations for schools to support learners at home due to self-isolation or class school closures. That we produce very clear guidance for schools on the use of CO2 monitors, and produce a clear strategy on how to deal with the issues of poor ventilation when they arise. And this should include funding that is very clearly set aside and earmarked to address any significant issues that have been identified. That we remove the phrase that we have continued to hear about business as usual from the framework to a more accurately positioned to reflect the situation in schools, to support schools in giving a consistent message to the public as well that doesn't put schools in conflict with parents. And then in terms of funding, that, Welsh Government clearly commits funding to COVID-19 related staff absence, including cover for staff with caring responsibilities, staff who of course are 28 weeks pregnant, and staff who need to self-isolate, and that we fund all measures needed to mitigate the spread of COVID-19, including any works to ensure windows can be opened, that we have HEPA filters, etc., based on individual risk assessments. And as far as TTP is concerned, that we increase the capacity in the TTP system so the schools have sufficient levels of support. I know there's been so much confusion around TTP and what the guidance actually says, and there's been lots of conflicting positions across the different schools. So it's very important that we now review all TTP guidance and that it's approached to support schools and bring some consistency to the system across all LAHBs. So that's why that was just me setting the scene a little bit. Just to say, we don't have the Minister with us this evening, but as I understand it, we do have some Welsh Government officials that are on the call. So if at any stage they wanted to come in and speak, then if they would indicate in the sidebar, then we can definitely do that. But alternative, like I said, today is really very much to hear from the workforce themselves. So if that is okay with everybody, I can see our numbers of participants is increasing as time goes on. I will open up and invite in Louise Jones, who is the head teacher in Carmarthenshire, to say a few words about her experience and some of the concerns that she has.
Good evening, everybody. Many thanks to everybody for attending this evening and sharing your plights. I know we've all got things that we are concerned about greatly, and ultimately we're affecting lives at the end of the day. We're all in exceptionally difficult positions. And I just want to raise some of the issues that I've raised. I'm sure they're very similar issues with yourselves across the different authorities. But within Carmarthenshire, some of the things have already been mentioned. We are having extreme difficulty with staffing absence. It isn't just that initial 10 days isolation that is the inevitable aspect of that. It's down to the fact that many of our staff now are severely ill with the virus, and they are going beyond the 10 days of isolation into up to 14, 15 and 16 days because they are genuinely ill. And as mentioned previously, we don't have supply cover. The supply agencies have got enough people out everywhere. There's not the capacity. And obviously, we then look at areas within our schools as to what we can do to support. So naturally, as professionals, we want to make sure that the children have the best. So we move our staff around to accommodate that, to make sure that obviously everybody's having the best deal. And then that in turn then is causing issues in terms of cross-contamination, other staff getting the virus, moving around the building, and obviously having implications then on staffing for further parts of the school. So in a nutshell, really, with regards to staffing, it's a huge issue. And having raised that with our authority, the message that we're given is that please don't make any decisions. Please don't do anything without talking through it first with us, with ourselves, and obviously every step of the way. We have asked our authority if it's possible for them to support us with our ESSAs in terms of our educational support challenge advisors, the old challenge advisors, to see if there would be a possibility of them supporting in schools due to the low level of staffing. And at the moment, we're waiting for a response on that, because clearly there's a high number of those individuals working from home at the moment who do have the capacity to work in schools, many of them ex-teachers. And therefore, we have asked if that could be a possibility, but within Carmarthenshire, we are waiting for a response on that. There are going to be occasions where particular schools, especially those with units attached, we've now got the message that special units, if staff are off, they can't return to work until they have a negative result. Now, that's causing concern within our region because it's taken a very long time now for results to come back. Initially, it was 24 hours. It's taken up to 3 days in some instances now. And then if the result is void, then you have to retest. So in essence, that's causing staffing shortages. So that is a major, major issue. And as I say, you've already alluded to that. The other thing for us, again, within our authority, is the concern for well-being is easily mentioned, and the words are always there, but the meaning behind it isn't, because well-being is on an agenda and is skirted over, and we're given a telephone number of who we can speak to. And then it's, let's get on with our school improvement business, because school must go on. And the fact is, school can't go on if the majority of the staff are off and the children are in and out, so they're not learning because they're back and forth school, because they're picking it up from the community as well as within school. So obviously clubs, social activities, social events, traces are tracing this back to events that are outside of our jurisdiction, outside of our control. So we could put in any number of measures within school, and by the time they get through the school gates at 3:30, they've gone into an environment where they're mixed again. So, it has very, very little implication, very, very little effectiveness. Meetings for heads tend to involve, at the moment, school improvement. And we were actually told today, when our risk level increased to moderate, that the meeting that we had today was a special meeting for 20 minutes, because the meetings that we have on Wednesdays are for school improvement purposes, and COVID shouldn't come into those meetings. Now, our meetings should be mainly about COVID at the moment, because that's where all our anxieties are. But we've had an hour and a half meeting last Wednesday, which involved WESP, ALN, new curriculum, and every time a hand was raised and a mention regarding COVID, we were either told that we would have answers in FAQs, or we would have a response sent to us via email, or this was not the time to discuss that. That should be done in a health and safety meeting on a Friday afternoon. Always the best time for a health and safety meeting at 2:00 on a Friday afternoon. And that's where we have very few heads being able to attend because of various things that go on in schools on Friday afternoons. As we all know, Friday afternoons are busy, and the majority of heads attend the Wednesday meeting. So why are we talking about all these other priorities when our priority is actually COVID? And rather than hog everybody's limelight this evening, the only other mention that I'd like to give in terms of from my colleagues within the region is we've had obviously the idea that the staggered starts should be removed, but we've got our parents, and I'm sure it's the same with your parents, who arrive at the school gate en masse. We can't amend school timings now. They have to come in at the same time. And obviously we've got maybe 150 people, children, prams, pushchairs, bikes, scooters, all assembled in my case, and certainly in other schools in the nearby region. We've got very little capacity to allow for people to be spacing out. They don't space out, and those staggered times were really effective in keeping us all safe. That option's gone for us within our area, so therefore we're now putting everybody at risk by the sheer volume of people that are outside the school gates in the morning. And again, then as head teachers, we are having the verbal abuse, because obviously people are having to wait, people are in the way of others, and we're taking on the jobs of everybody: police, social services, health. I don't know how many hats we're supposed to be wearing, but to be honest, these are very worrying times, and I'm sure everybody feels the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. I think you've covered lots of really important points that we have been hearing from members across the union, and it's interesting to hear from you as a school head making those points. I just wanted to let people know that they can, as they have been, post comments in the chat box as well, which we will keep a record of, and we will pull together. There's a couple of things there around, I think there's something from Rob Shaw. Question for those Welsh Government representatives who are here: why are teachers being told to have face-to-face parent evening interviews when the Welsh Labour Party conference has been cancelled on the grounds of COVID-19? Safety, Gaynor Lloyd has said, I work in a small village school which has small classrooms. I currently teach 23 pupils with very little room to move about. Windows and doors are open, but now it's getting colder. Pupils want the windows shut. What can we do during the even colder winter months? And then Jamie Hatswell has said, I'm in a special needs school in Pembrokeshire. Up until this week, we've been following guidelines based on mainstream schools. Some of the younger pupils have vulnerable conditions, and staff in some classes are more like carers. At last this week, Welsh Government have issued guidance for 10 schools, too little, too late. And there's some comments there, some excellent speech comments from Shirley there as well in relation to what Louise said. And then Litsa said, I work in an ALN comprehensive school. We as staff have nowhere away from the children to eat our lunch as LFT testing on pupils is being done in our staff room. Surely the lateral flow test testing should be done elsewhere for the staff to have a break. Yes, absolutely agree. So I'll keep an eye on that. Next, I'd like to bring in Kerina Hanson, who is the head teacher in Swansea and is also the NAHT Cymru president. Kerina, are you?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks
yeah.
very much. Hi, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, we can. Over to you.
Hi, thank you very much. Thanks. Yeah, it's very similar to Louise. The lots of us in Swansea see very high staff absence. Swansea, one of the first local authorities to move into a high for schools on the framework. Now, when that happened, I must admit, most of us in Swansea were really confused about what that meant for us. So there was a lot of confusion. As a primary school, when I look at the framework that we've got in place that is meant to be there to keep us and our children safe, it really makes very little difference. feel that the framework doesn't really work for primary settings, because there's a caveat in every single mitigation measure that states that might not be suitable for younger children. Now, where's the cut-off for that? Am I talking about my just my reception children, or am I talking about because it depends how your primary school works, doesn't it? And the way that you've got your classes organised. So are we talking about younger children as in from year 6 downwards, or are we talking about younger children reception only? I don't know, because the framework really doesn't give very good guidance for us. Now, it's very confusing for us as head teachers, because we read that framework, and part of that framework includes the TTP. But TTP isn't working, because schools aren't being contacted, even when sometimes their staff have got COVID. So there's a whole framework, part of a framework, that is just not functioning. And the news this week that we're not going to test under 5-year-olds is really confusing. So we've got really high levels of COVID in schools, and now we're not going to test children that are under 5. Well, they may not be in any higher danger, but they can still transmit COVID. So I think we're very confused about the messaging that we're getting from people like TTP, who will be very happy to tell us that there's no transmission in schools, that it's all coming from the community. It's clearly not, because if you look at Swansea, the rates are really high, and it's mainly within children of those age, the age groups in primary and secondary school. And the fact that staff are catching COVID as well, it's the highest it's ever been. We've come back to school, supposedly back to business. It's not back to business for schools. Schools are in a really difficult position. You've heard about the high levels of staff absence. We are not functioning in any way, anywhere near a back to normal place. We're not at all. And the whole premise of us being back to normal is that we want children in school. And do you know what? I don't know a single teacher or a single teaching assistant, support member of staff, head teacher that doesn't want their children in school. But the framework, as it is and as it stands, is actually making it worse. Higher absence, higher staff absence, a higher place at the moment where we're just not functioning as schools than we had before. I don't think, I think every school I'm talking to, they're all saying exactly the same thing. We teach children, we can't get on with curriculum, we can't get on with, this huge reform that we've got going on in Wales at the moment. And none of these things can happen. Yet, as Louise has just said, the pressure is on all of us to carry on as normal, back to business, get your schools ready for the new curriculum next year, implement your ALN bill, and get on with it. But it's not really what we're doing. It's not what we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So I think for me, the framework really needs to be reviewed. TTP really needs to be reviewed. And head teachers need to be part of that discussion. And the reality of what it's like in a school needs to be listened to. I think you've got
Welsh Government,
lots of people feeling very
such like all about sort of COVID
very
current.
upset.
This is every education
like
union all together on one big call.
Are being listened to.
That's that.
Yeah. I think somebody's talking there. And just my final point is around the messaging that's out there in the public. Again, picking up on what Louise was talking about, the back to business message, of course, is out there. So our parents cannot understand when we're in a level 0 in the community, yet we're in schools at high. So you've got schools saying, well, I can't do certain things because we've got to try and mitigate against the spread in our schools. And that is leading to real stress between schools and parents. We've got this bit of time coming up called Christmas now, and you're going to have parents thinking, Yeah, we should have Christmas concerts and we should be having Christmas fairs and there should be all sorts of stuff going on. And you've got a head teacher sitting there going, can I really do that? Am I allowed to do that? What does it mean? Can it? Oh, no, it doesn't actually mention that in my framework because it doesn't tell me. There's not enough detail for me to know whether I can do that. So we're turning to our local authorities who, really aren't giving us the guidance perhaps yet either. It's really confusing. And to be honest, I don't really want to make those decisions. I don't think it's my role. I'm not I'm not an expert in health. I need to rely on those people to tell me that it's safe enough to do. My gut feeling says it's not safe enough to have 200 parents crammed into a hall with my children at the moment. But the other part of me thinks, but that's wrong for the children. It's a really difficult time for us. And
I can hear the frustration, Kerina. I can hear it.
We're having to make are difficult. Sorry, I'll stop now.
Listen, thank you for raising the realities around TTP and some of the problems with TTP. Again, that has been a very big topic of discussion. I just wanted to alert everyone, in case you haven't picked it up, that on the 5th of October as well, there was a written statement by Jeremy Miles, the Minister for Education and Welsh Language, in relation to future arrangements for COVID-19 testing for children and young people and for staff working in special schools and colleges. I think there has been a link posted up in the chat box as well for people. And so the recommendation is if a child is off sick, and is feeling unwell before they come back to school, that there should actually be a PCR test that is taken. But if there is somebody in their household who's unwell, then they should be using lateral flow tests as well. So there's some further advice in relation to that is worth checking out. But I wanted to say something in relation to some of the other comments. People, please keep posting your comments, because there's a comment here about from Marie Williams, who said, could HEPA filters not be used in classrooms? As the weather gets colder, would it not be a good idea to invest in the filters? Yes, absolutely. That would be a very good idea. That is something that the Wales TUC has been pushing for, as well as the CO2 monitors. CO2 monitors have now been agreed, and that they are going to be something that schools should have access to, but HEPA filters are, there are cost implications. And again, there are also, as I understand it, some issues over supply and accessibility of some of those. But there was some other comments here too that are quite interesting. Sam Sharp says, one of my colleagues said on a Teams meeting today, she has a thematic Estin inspection next Thursday and had 1 week's notice as the original email did not arrive. They're coming in for a full day in person, interviewing staff and carrying out book scrutiny and learning walks. This is linked to preparation for the new curriculum. We are currently in high risk, and she is filled with dread that she may not even have enough staff on the day of the visit itself, the day that it's been booked. So that's going to be a massive issue there, of course. Bit of a ridiculous expectation, and so that's something else that has come up again. Also, Sara Allen saying, totally agree. The amount of members that have been in contact to say that lateral flow tests are not giving correct results is huge. Shirley Howells says, I'm a level 3 LSA who isn't employed as a cover supervisor, yet I was in charge of a class of 33 children today as my class teacher is off with COVID and we couldn't get cover. I was helped by another LSA. So again, as the two previous speakers have said, this is these are some of the ongoing issues as well. So do keep posting those in. And yes, and as just to say, as Nicholas Savage from the GMB has also said, 28 weeks pregnant people are entitled to an individual risk assessment. If the risk assessment cannot be removed, you should work from home. So I will keep those going, and I'll keep an eye on those. But in the meantime, I would like to invite Sara Allen, who is a TA in Cardiff, to come in next, please. Sara, I don't know if you're on the call, but if you are,
yes.
you could, yep, great, thank you.
It's coming up now. Sorry about that. Yeah, I've actually worked in school for 16 years, and for the last 2 years I've worked in schools convener for Unison. And these are the queries we're getting from members. The current framework doesn't go far enough to ensure mitigation measures protect pupils and staff working in schools. Since Welsh Government announced the relaxing of the need for face coverings in all areas of school, support staff have been worried. I've had members of staff on the phone, support staff crying in tears, saying they feel so unsafe. They don't know what else to do. You know, they've got positive members of a family at home with COVID, and then they still be able to go to work because they've had the 2 injections. Unison has frequently raised with the Welsh Government that they've removed the masks, as we feel is one of the ways that staff and pupils could be protected. Many other countries have kept mitigation measures in place while also undertaking a vaccination programme for school pupils, and they have not experienced the surge in cases in the school. We know the number of COVID-19 cases among school children is rising in Wales. Members feel vulnerable when pupils are attending school, where a member of the household has tested positive, yet they turn up selflessly every day, not knowing whether those they're in very close contact with might be contagious. We're asking Welsh Government to listen to our members' concerns and bring back some of the mitigation measures, such as face coverings, not just rely on local decisions to make this happen. That is too little, too late. At the moment, I'm in a local authority where every single school in the large authority is at high risk. You know, every mitigation has been put in place and the transmission rate is still increasing, and we're still not seeing any change or shift in the government's decisions.
Thank you, Sara. Next, I have Jane Harries, who's a head teacher in Pembrokeshire, on my list to come in. Jane, would you like to come in?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm a head teacher in Pembrokeshire, as you just said, and basically a member of ASCL, gathering the thoughts and views of my members in Pembrokeshire and wider. What I would have liked to have asked, should the Minister have been with us, is are the government satisfied with the way in which the return to school has gone since September? You've heard from everybody the issues that they're facing. It's been one of the most challenging return to schools that I've ever had. I'm not going to go over all the challenges. Everybody has very eloquently put that. But what I would like from the Minister or from government is, are they happy with the way in which things have gone? And if they're not, as we would hope they wouldn't be because of the way the depth of feeling that is being shown here, would they be able to respond as to what they think they can do in order to support us? ASCL sit at the table with all our colleagues, and the strength of feeling is evident today, isn't it? Just the many people that are in this room and in this meeting, and the many different unions that all have agreed and have the same voice, really. So it's a plea, really, from Welsh Government to answer that question, if they would, please.
Thank you, Jane. We will make sure that we feed through those questions and many of the comments that are coming in that have been posted up as well. There was, in relation to Estyn, it's worth noting, I think Neil Butler said that he has got a meeting with Estyn, and he is going to be from the NASUWT, so he is going to be raising yet again the issue around school visits, because they should not be taking place if there isn't a capacity, of course, but also given a situation with cases rising. Nicola Savage from the GMB has also been posting up about GMB member having said schools are no longer safe. Never has there been so many COVID cases in our local schools and only been back 4 weeks. Our head teacher is fabulous and does everything she can, but there is only so much she can do. With this new rule from the Welsh Government, assembly of not isolating close contacts or children not isolating if someone in their household has COVID is putting all children, staff and their families at risk. I feel there is no thought for us at all, and it is as if COVID has gone. No social distancing, children can't wear masks and are not vaccinated. Some parents are supportive, but some refuse to get their children tested or keep them home. We are fighting a losing battle. We want to do our job, but it is our right and the children's right to feel and to be safe as well. So there's lots of comments there. Alo Davis says, I feel there is now, we are seeing a huge rise in cases in Wales, rural Wales. My daughter went into school today and came home saying that out of 19 girls, there was only 6 girls in due to the overall others having tested positive within the last 2 days. I'm just wondering about child well-being. When does that come into this? My daughter's already been asked to be off school due to her best friends being off. I realise this isn't a major issue and can't be helped within the school. They're trying to make it as safe as possible. So there are lots of different comments that are coming in. But next I wanted to bring in Liz McClean, who works in a special school in Denbighshire. Liz,
hello.
You want to come in?
Yes, thank you. I'm just unmuting myself. So as Shaz said, my name is Liz McClean and I'm District and Branch Secretary for Denbighshire NEU and also the newly appointed Executive Member for Wales. But I'm also a full-time teacher and I've spent most of my career working in ALM provisions across Wales. And I currently work in a specialist centre for pupils who have a diagnosis of autism and ASD. This past 2 years has been without doubt the most challenging in my career, both as an active trade unionist and as a teacher at the chalkface. This has been caused by the huge pressures mentioned by all the previous speakers, which have been placed on teachers due to the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. Earlier this week, many ALM provisions welcomed the updated advice to parents and carers, which came from the Deputy Chief Medical Officer. We had a letter that urged that if a child should self-isolate if they had any of the following symptoms, which included high temperature, cough, loss of sense of smell and taste, headache, runny nose, sneezing, sore throat, and any other symptoms out of the ordinary. Professor Chris Jones also stressed that the child who had symptoms should not return to school until they had a negative PCR test and were well enough to return. But I would ask that similar advice goes out to all pupils with ALN who are taught in a mainstream setting as well, because they are arguably more at risk than their peers who are taught in a specialist provision. As has been mentioned, currently many schools and colleges are trying to balance the rising figures of positive cases of COVID, both within the pupil population and staffing, with severe supply shortages that are affecting all parts of Wales. Some pupils within those specialist educational settings should receive one-to-one support to enable access and participation. And they may find that this, in fact, is not available now due to staff shortages, linked to illness, isolation, or lack of supply cover. In ALM provisions, those staff shortages are not only detrimental to pupil engagement and learning, but could also put staff and pupils at risk. So I would ask that the issues I've spoken about briefly this evening are addressed by the Welsh Government and Public Health Wales as a matter of urgency to ensure that the most vulnerable learners and the educational staff who support them are protected from the risk that this virus still presents. Many thanks.
Thank you, Liz. It's really important that we get a variety of views from different types of school settings as well. So thanks for that. I wanted to point to something that was posted by Chelsea Davis, who says, I'm currently 19 weeks pregnant. At the start of the term, I shared my concerns with head teacher of the school, as well as the risk assessor. I felt their response was blasé, to say the least. I had to stamp my feet to get measures in place to protect me, e.g. asking pupils in my class to wear masks, putting screens around my desk, putting tape on my floor to show pupils where the 2 meter away from me is. However, I have ended up catching COVID. I have no doubt that this is because not all pupils in my class were willing to wear masks. The cleaning of our school is shockingly poor, and pupils are not having to go home if they are close contacts of positive cases, unless they are symptomatic. I am lucky that I have not had a severe case of it. However, other pregnant women will also not be so fortunate. 28 weeks is too late. And on that point, just to say, if you are a pregnant worker and your employer hasn't conducted an individual risk assessment, that is extremely problematic and can be deemed as indirect discrimination. That was something that our lawyers have recently advised, and it's something that we've been sharing with government and also with the EHRC as well. That was a top QC who gave that advice to us. So it is very important that individual risk assessments are completed for all workers, particularly for pregnant workers, and that they are reviewed on a regular basis as well. And just to Jamie Hatswiller said, pupils are getting positive cases in our SEND school in Pembrokeshire, then parents are informed and some choose not to send them in. And staff ratios are too high, so staff from that class are sent to cover other classes, which then can spread the virus and cross-contaminate your course. 4 classes have closed since September. Most staff are not showing main symptoms until 8 to 10 days. So even after a negative PCR on day 2, they then return to work and possibly spread the virus. So, you know, COVID hasn't gone away. COVID is still very much alive and kicking, and is yet to, show us whether or not it's going to change. I wanted to bring in our next speaker, Mairead Canavan from the Vale of Glamorgan to speak next, please.
Thanks, Shav. The NEU's priority is the same as Welsh Government's priority, and I'm hearing it's the priority of all the other unions in the room tonight, actually, and that's for education staff to deliver face-to-face, high-quality education to all pupils. However, that needs to be done in a way that protects both adults and pupils in education settings. The narrative that education settings should be operating as close to normal as possible doesn't make sense when the numbers of staff and children isolating are as high or higher than they've been at any time during the pandemic. Schools, including, worryingly, very large secondary schools coming back to full staff meetings and even full year group assemblies. In my own local authority, I know of at least one school with year groups in excess of 300 pupils who've gone back to full assemblies in a windowless auditorium, with the only mitigation being the wearing of face coverings. There's no such thing as social distancing in schools, and certainly not in an auditorium with over 300 pupils. Auditoriums are renowned for having no ventilation, which we now know is the most important mitigation. The extra CO2 monitors haven't made their way into schools in Wales yet, as far as I'm aware of, and this is a breeding ground for the virus. And although double vaccinated staff may not be ending up in hospital, they are becoming infected. Some are becoming quite ill, and all having to isolate, which is putting pressure on schools in terms of covering absence. Many schools are now moving back to full parents' evenings and open evenings. Where these can and have been successfully done online, they should continue to be undertaken online while virus levels are still high and still rising. We all know there are adults in the community who have yet to be vaccinated, and staff should not be expected to sit in crowded rooms face to face with other adults at this point in the pandemic, when there are other successful ways of having these communications. We find it very contradictory for the Welsh Government, on the one hand, to say people should work from home if possible, but then to allow some schools to make decisions which put staff at unnecessary risk because of the ambiguity in Welsh Government guidance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mairead. There's a comment there from Stephanie Gillard, who says the timings of when being asked or taking PCR tests also, let me just go back up because the comment is still there. Just give me a second. Yes, so the timings of when being asked or taking PCR tests also seems to have an impact. Late results lead to the spread of negative or late presentation of symptoms, lead to staff member being in contact with other classes due to, of course, the emergency situation of short staff covering, and we need ourselves in. So that needs addressing. And Helen Thomas has also said, I'm a TA in a reception class. We've had 2 cases in the last 2 weeks where the siblings were already at home with COVID. Myself and the teacher had 3 PCR tests already, and we'll have another one on Tuesday. We're dreading what's going to happen when they stop testing under 5s. And then Nicola Savage has also pointed to the hardship fund and the dependence leave issue there. Laura Dole has said CO2 monitors are only going to be worth the money. Yes, absolutely. If we do something about the areas of poor ventilation, as Mairead has just mentioned as well, that they identify, Welsh Government must commit to resolving the problems brought to light by the monitors. Otherwise, they're a £3 million waste of time. Sarah Allen again says, business as usual. If you work in a school, this is not happening in other government environments. So very important points there. So I am conscious of time, but I know that we did sort of wait because people were still logging on. So if it's okay with my team behind the scenes, I think we started at 6:10. So if we could do sort of half the hour, I think we may need that. So if we aim to finish by 7:10. So I'd like to bring in our next speaker, Tim Newbould from Wrexham.
I share the views that have been expressed, and I'm not going to repeat what colleagues have already said, but I think it's important that we recognise that those are not just personal views. They are indicative of the situation right across the piece. It is difficult for all sorts of reasons, and all schools are under pressure because of the two major reforms that are going on at the moment. I mean, we're into the ALN now. That is statutory, and we've got the new curriculum coming as well. So the pressure that's on, and it beggars belief that the ESTIN and consortia can be coming into schools and saying business as usual, when we can't do business as usual with staff absences and all that we're still managing through COVID. That's all I'm going to say, because I think all the points have been made already by colleagues across the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. And just to let you remind everyone that we are doing some live polling as well. So there's a link there to the polling form that will have a series of questions. Sam Collins has said, I'm a rep and teach secondary. I know no one who is not expected to attend assemblies, no masks and staff meetings. Circulation in class also strongly encouraged. Mary has also pointed, CO2 monitors are scheduled for delivery to local authorities on the 13th and 14th of October, a week later than originally anticipated due to logistical issues in the supply chain. So that's worth noting. Next, I'd like to bring in Jack Johnson, who is a support staff member in a special school.
Hi, I just wanted to say, that my colleagues are exhausted. On a daily basis, they are working in a special school where pupils' needs vary massively. And this can include very intimate personal care and responding to challenging behaviour for a large portion of their day. My colleagues tell me that they feel overlooked. The anxiety that they have endured throughout the last 18 months, and for who knows how much longer, has finally taken its toll. Just like many other frontline workers, my colleagues also feel they've been ignored in relation to being protected at work. Working in such close proximity with pupils who could well be carrying the virus is affecting not only their mental health at work, but also impacting on their personal lives. They're having to make judgments based on the level of risk that they've been exposed to in school, and also carrying the burden of keeping their families safe at home. What we're asking for is support for those working in special schools to be improved. Mitigations need to be reintroduced, and extra funding from the Welsh Government is needed to cover for staff absences. This is to prevent colleagues from ending up doing their own job and that of their absent colleagues. Like many frontline staff, my colleagues have worked throughout the pandemic, and they have gone above and beyond to support learners to the best of their ability without complaint. But if nothing changes, staff absences will continue to increase, their well-being will continue to suffer. Extra funding and mitigations from the Welsh Government would provide support staff with the reassurance that they need to keep themselves and our learners safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Really important messages there. We've also had a message from Alison Williamson, who said the local authorities are very keen to protect some workers, and that is very keen to protect some workers who are working from home and encouraged to do so still. But school staff are expected to just carry on. The hypocrisy is unbelievable. Eartha has said a member has reported there is increased anxiety with pupils in SEND schools, and this is leading to increased aggression, of course, between the pupils, and this is exhausting staff. Yet another knock-on effect there. And Chelsea Davis says, I couldn't agree more. Alison, I have an occupational health meeting arranged, yet this is going to happen over the phone because of COVID. And Laura Dole again says, business as usual does not mean TAs covering classes. Of course, teachers supporting learners in the classroom and at home at the same time, and it does not include school leaders doubling up as lunchtime supervisors. We are far from business as usual. I really fear the long-term impact working at this level in terms of the stress and intensity will have on the profession. And then Stephanie has just sort of supported Jack's position there, as has Nia. And Jamie Hatswell has said, vulnerable pupils in SEND schools who shielded in the first lockdown and are too young for vaccinations or can't have them for health reasons are just as vulnerable now as they were then. Almost most staff are double jabbed, but still can infect their own relatives and children. Yes, and that's an important point to make. I wanted to bring in the next person, who is Roger Vaughan. Roger, I don't know if you are on this call, but if you are and you would like to unmute yourself and come.
Helo, sy'n noswaith dda. Na'n neud o'n Gymraeg a yn Saesneg, I'll do it in Welsh and English quickly. Oedden ni'n mewn sefyllfa ffodus iawn blwyddyn dwytha, gathon ni ddim achosion tan reit yn diwedd y flwyddyn. Ond yn yr 4 wythnos gyntaf mae'r achosion mewn staff a plant wedi mynd trwy'r to. A mae'n jyst yn bryder gyda i bod yr monitor CO2, mae'r tywydd yn oeri a does na ddim, wel, maen nhw'n hwyr yn cyrraedd a wrach fydd hi'n dolyg mwy na thebyg erbyn nhw'n cyrraedd ysgolion i gyd. I was in a school, I work in a school where last year we had no cases with any year groups having to isolate until the very last week of term. So I think we were one of the only schools who managed that. But this year our numbers of pupils and staff have gone through the roof. And we're just worried that, where are these CO2 monitors that, as the winter months are coming now, it's going to get colder, the air quality will get poorer and the cases will get higher and higher. And it's just a strain on everybody.
Diolch, Roger. Just to say that if anyone does wish to speak in Welsh, there is the live transcript available, so you can enable that, and so that will cover that. Thank you for that. There's a comment here from Nia Good, who said it's obvious that pupils across Wales are having a different experience depending on the location of the school, the quality of the building and the number of positive cases as well. Rosie Lewis has said, unless there's a whole-scale review of what is happening across and how things can change. Lots of people agreeing with Laura and reminding people that together we are stronger. And there was, I think that is most of what was in the, and there was also a comment from Nia about with so many people isolating, teachers expected to prepare online lessons, and there's a culture of expecting work to be presented online when learners are absent. Workload is increasing with marking feedback to written work as well as online work as well. So that's that in itself is causing a massive problem. And Wendy Lewis has said it is demoralizing to work in a crowded secondary school watching both pupils and staff contract COVID. We just wait to see who is off today. Who amongst them will become particularly unwell? Will it be us next? Are we going to keep talking about the situation, or is it time for action? And Andrew Hay said, double jabbing doesn't stop you from getting COVID. We have such members who have been quite ill in the last few weeks. And absolutely important. Then the last person that I have on my list of speakers who would like to come in is Nia Parry. Nia, are you on the call? Would you like to come in?
Yes, hello, good evening. I work in a special school and I work with colleagues from the NEU in a special school as well, and I know she's here this evening. I know both of us, are happy that the written statement has come, because it's a recognition about the situation in special schools, and it's something that a lot of us have been concerned about for a very long time. So that is a step forward. It's not perfect, it's got a lot of work to do, but it is a recognition, and I think that is the first step of this. I think for us, as a school, it's looking at things such as the risk assessments, and the workload and who is going to do these risk assessments, isn't it? And the pressure and the additional work that comes from that. And it's looking at the robust TTP system as well, isn't it? Things will only work if all the other systems are there to support us and help us, and not become a barrier and not create more problems, because we are there to support the families, and we want the children to come into school, and we want them to feel safe in school and know that they're learning, and help and support our families, because we know that if they're not in school, our children are at home, and with their behaviours and with their additional learning needs, that is a real challenge for some of our families, where online learning is not appropriate or is very limited. So we need to be able to have the children in school, but for them to be safe, and have the systems in place to enable us to do that safely. So things like the TTP, the risk assessments, and the whole conversation over testing and the accuracy of the PCRs and the LFTs. So there's a lot more work to do. Written statements the first step, but we need step 2, 3 and 4 now. And I think that sort of comes up from the special schools, really.
Thank you, Nia. And actually, Matthew Salmon, are you on the call, and would you like to address as the ASCL president, please?
Yeah, thanks, Shav. I'll just round things off. I mean, this is another direct question, really, for Welsh Government, for the Minister. ASCL members and members from the other unions are all saying the same thing, really. They're telling us day in, day out about the impact of staff and pupil absences in schools and colleges right across the country. And there are significant concerns, not simply in terms of day-to-day operations, which have been well documented in the discussion this evening, but also in terms of the sort of short to medium-term work that we have to do in schools. And for example, in relation to the preparedness for the forthcoming exam series, many members are telling us that the framework isn't working, isn't fit for purpose, and some people have said much worse things about it, which I won't repeat here. But I suppose the question really for the Minister and for Welsh Government officials is, what additional or revised mitigations are going to be introduced to support schools and colleges in addressing this challenge?
Thank you, Matthew. We will make sure that we feed back all of these questions and the various different comments that we have been picking up from everybody this evening. Rosie Lewis has also put in there, until there's a whole-scale review across Wales, we are only going to see things get worse. What needs to happen before more changes are introduced to protect staff? We know other public sector workers are more confident that they are safer going into work because adequate measures are in place. It should be no different for those working in schools. And it is worth me mentioning as well that as far as higher education and further education is concerned, their mitigations of risks remain as they were previously. They haven't been removed. So it is concerning that when it comes to school settings, that the situation has been deemed as different. So that is an important point that I wanted to raise. I'm not sure if there is a representative from UCU on the call who may want to say something in relation to this. Okay, I can't hear if there is anyone. But yeah, again, there's lots of comments here. Gaynor Lloyd has also said, my concern is also planning and implementing the new curriculum, and many pupils have already fallen behind with basic skills. During lockdown, many pupils worked online and did not do any actual handwriting. And so, that in itself is a massive issue. Just to remind everyone, we do have a polling form, so there's a series of questions there. And just to say that we have recorded the event this evening. As I say, there have been some Welsh Government officials and some other ministers and politicians that are on the call and have been very carefully listening to your concerns. And we will make sure, as a trade union side, that we take forward these issues, as Dilwyn Roberts has said there, as well as trade unions and associations. We will continue the commitment to our members to work with Welsh Government and local authorities and a challenge in order to work towards a safe school environment. Nicola Savage saying the JTUs, or FE, of which I'm a member, have an excellent relationship with Coleg Cymru. The work continues in terms of mitigations as well. And as Flickstock, one of my colleagues from the Wales TUC, has reminded everybody, if you think of anything after this event or you don't feel a bit comfortable in sharing today, you can email in at Wales TUC, so that's wtuc@tuc.org.uk, and we'll make sure that your questions are then collated as well. And David Evans has said here as well, the good thing is that they have now heard from the profession that things that we have been telling them. So, just to again, thank you all for participating today. We have recorded the event. We will collate all of the information and make sure that this is fed back in. It is very important. I found it, it's been pretty fascinating listening directly from people in these sectors. We engage with your representatives on a regular basis. The fact that regardless of what role you have within the school setting, that everyone is very clear that the mitigations of risks are extremely problematic, and the framework needs to be revisited. There's a lot of work to be done, but it's not something that can't be done either. We're not asking for the impossible here. What we are asking for is very much within our reach as well. So diolch yn fawr everybody. Thank you for joining us today, and we will definitely keep you posted, and do stay in touch with us. Thank you everybody.